Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to BookBeat again. And we're in the Spenser series. This is number 7. It's called Early Autumn. And yeah, I think you're in for a real treat when you read this book. It might be one of the best Spenser books, and I think it is definitely the most important. So, why don't we take a look at Spenser number 7, Early Autumn. So, who is in the story? Well, the main character is a young 15-year-old boy named Paul Giacomin. We also meet his mother, Patty, and his father, Mel. They're a divorced couple who are basically hate each other. And all of this is falling in the lap of Paul, who's being shuttled back and forth between the two of them. Almost, he's like a pawn between them, a way for them to hurt one another. And he's suffering, and he becomes a young, sullen 15-year-old boy with no friends, nothing to do, no direction. And so he's the key character, and we actually meet him in future Spenser stories. I'll talk more about him in a bit. We've got Hawk, we've got Susan, and we've got a bad guy named Harry Cotton, who figures in quite importantly into the story, the mystery part of the story. Okay, so where does this story take place? Well, basically 3 main places. Most of the first part of the book is in Boston. Various places in Boston, places we've been before. But it's always fun, especially if you're from Boston, to visit these places. And this is, don't forget, the late 1970s. So Boston has changed a lot since then, for sure. So if you want to know what Boston was like in those days, this book is going to bring you right there. Also, Spenser, Paul, and Susan take a short trip to New York City. And that's really fun. The awe that Spenser feels in New York is palpable and enjoyable. And young Paul really loves it too. And then the latter part of the book, most of it takes place in the backwoods of Maine. And that's really enjoyable and interesting too. We'll get back to that in a second. So what's the story here? Why is Spenser hired? Well, Patty Giacomin, Paul's mother, comes to Spenser to ask him to find Paul, who has been taken by his father, Mel. Apparently, this has happened more than once, but this time he's all but disappeared, and she doesn't know where he is, and she wants him back because she loves him. Well, we don't really quite figure out how much she does love him, but probably not very much. He's her kid, he's there, and she wants him back, and so she hires Spenser to do that. And so that's how we get into the story here. Okay, action. There's a lot of good action scenes, tense scenes in the book. Robert B. Parker does a really good job with all of this. Okay, first we've got a scene where Spenser is confronting Mel, the father, and Mel's basically threatening to kick his butt and kick him out of the place where Spenser has come to bring back Paul. So that's a nice scene. There's a scene between Spenser and a guy a guy named Buddy and his partner Harold, who come to Patty's house to take Paul back again to the father. And this leads to lots of other complications in the story, because Buddy's a bad guy, and Spenser can't figure out how Mel knows Buddy, and this leads to other complications in the story, and the relationship with the criminal gangster Harry Cotton. There's a great scene on a bridge where Hawk and Spenser basically they've set up, the bad guys have set up a trade. They've taken Patty now, and they're saying, okay, we'll trade Patty for the boy. And Spenser calls Hawk, explains the situation, and then there's a lot of action on the bridge where the exchange is supposed to take place. So yeah, this is where suddenly Hawk pops into the story again. Another great scene where Spenser confronts Harry Cotton, the guy who's behind all of this. There's an important scene where Spenser, Paul, and Susan are shot at in front of Susan's house, which in the world of Spenser and Hawk is a big no-no. They're big on always separating their work from private, and the fact that they took shots of them in front of Susan's house infuriates him and Hawk. And guess what? They're going to get their revenge, and that's what they do. Maybe the final really nice action scene is Hawk and Spenser going after Cotton. So there's a lot of action in the book, but I think, okay, let's look at the surprises then. I think that, as I said, this is probably the most important Spenser book there is. Why? Well, first of all, Susan and Hawk think that Spenser is incredibly stupid for trying to help Paul. They can't understand. They just think he's too sentimental. And it creates an incredible strain on the relationship between Spenser and Susan. And I think this strain, although they straighten it out in this book, it leads to problems in their relationship that start popping up all over the place in books after this. This is book 7. It's soon after this that Susan kind of leaves him and becomes an intern in Washington, D.C., and then later moves to California. I mean, it's really uncomfortable to read the conversations between the two of them, and to see how angry Susan is, and then how kind of surprised and disappointed that Spenser is with how she reacts. And he tells her at one time, she says, "Don't bring your dirty laundry," not exactly, but something like that. "Don't bring your dirty laundry into my home, into my life." And Spenser says, "Hey, you love me, you love my problems." And so Susan is still struggling with their relationship and how much she does love him. She knows he's a good person, but this shocked her that Spenser goes out of his way to help a young kid that he doesn't even know, and puts helping him above his relationship with Susan. Susan can't understand that and resents it, bitterly resents it. And yeah, we can feel that bitterness. Robert B. Parker does a really good job in exposing all of that deep and troubling emotion. But it makes us realize that Spenser is a magnificent human being, and it's the reason we love the series and we love him, by how he decides to just completely put everything aside and help this young 15-year-old kid. And how does he do it? Well, one of the major points is that he decides to take Paul into the Maine backwoods and build a log cabin. And it takes months, and he's away from Susan, and he doesn't even know this kid, but he just cannot face, when it's within his grasp to help this boy, he just cannot pass up doing it. And he commits himself to doing it, and he does it. So, are there any important repeats in this besides, the struggles between Spenser and Susan, his relationship with Hawk? Yeah, we've seen that before. That's there again. Hawk is not yet 100% the Hawk we know, but he's getting closer and closer and closer. But one interesting repeat here that also made me think a lot about Robert P. Parker's choice of plotting and storylines is, here's another shitty family. And my first reaction was, oh man, another one? Like, can he come up with anything better than this? But, I thought about it a lot, and actually, there are a lot of famous crime writers who have plots that basically revolve around shitty families. I mean, Agatha Christie did it all the time in her Poirot and Miss Marple stories. And even someone more hardcore like Raymond Chandler. I mean, a lot of the problems in his stories revolve around, rich families with troublesome people in them. So Philip Marlowe is involved in all these problems that happen with shitty families. So yeah, I guess it's not something out of the ordinary in these kinds of detective stories. So, okay, let's look at some of my favorite lines from the story. As usual, I'd like to basically read how it all starts, and this is how chapter 1 begins. The urban renewers had struck again. They'd evicted me, a fortune teller, and a bookie from the corner of Mass Avenue in Boylston, moved in with sandblasters and bleached oak and plant hangers, and last I looked, appeared to be turning the place into a Marin County whorehouse. I moved down Boylston Street to the corner of Berkeley and second floor. I was half a block from Brooks Brothers and right over a bank. I felt at home. In the bank, they did the same kind of stuff the fortune teller and the bookie had done, but they dressed better. And then he explains a little bit about how he gets into the case. I was standing in the window of my office looking out at a soft, rainy January day with the temperature in the high 50s and no sign of snow. To the right across Boylston, I could see Bonwit Teller. To the left, police headquarters. In Bonwit's windows, there were mannequins wearing tight leather clothes and chains. Police headquarters leaned more to Dacron. In the window bay of the advertising agency across the street, a young black-haired woman in high-waisted gray trousers leaned over a drawing board. Her back was toward the window. "My compliments to your tailor," I said out loud. My voice sounded odd in the empty room. The black-haired woman went away, and I sat at my desk and looked at the picture of Susan Silverman. It was the blow-up of a color picture taken last summer in her backyard. Her tanned face and pink blouse were bright against the dark green of the muted trees. I was still looking at Susan's face when my office door opened and a client came in carrying a belted poplin raincoat over one arm. She said, "Mr. Spenser?" I said, "I knew my clientele would upgrade when I moved in over a bank." She smiled wonderfully at me. She had blonde hair that contrasted handsomely with her black eyes and dark eyebrows. She was small and very trim and elegant. She had on a tailored black suit and vest, white shirt, black bow tie with long ends like Brett Maverick used to wear, and black boots with very high, narrow heels. She was wearing gold, and it looked real. Gold earrings, gold watch, gold chain around the neck, gold chain bracelets, a wide gold wedding band, and a large diamond in a gold setting. I was optimistic about my fee. She said, "You are Mr. Spenser?" I said, "Yes," and stood up, and held a chair for her. She had a precise walk and a very nicely integrated figure, and she sat erect in the chair. I went around behind my desk again and sat down and smiled. So, this is how the book begins, and this is Patty Giacomin, Paul's mother. She smiled again. It was a good one, 150 watt, but I'd seen better. Susan could have smiled her right into the woodwork. He says a similar thing about Susan in the last book, in comparing Susan to Rachel. She moved her body slightly in the chair. She remained trim and upright, but somehow a wiggle came through. I said, "If you bat your eyes at me, I'm calling a policewoman." She wiggled again without moving. How the hell does she do that? "I've got to trust you," she said. "I have no one else. I must turn to you." "Hard," I said. "Hard for a woman, alone, I'll bet." Wiggle, smile, sigh. "Yes, I've got to find someone to help me. Will it be you?" She leaned forward slightly. She moistened her lower lip. "Will you help me?" "I would gather stars," I said, "out of the blue." "Don't make fun of me," she said. "I'm desperate." "What are you desperate about?" "My son. His father has taken him. And what would you like me to do?" "Bring him back." Okay. And as usual, one of the great things in all of the Spenser books is the humor and his one-liners. Here's one that starts chapter 2. He said, "At 120,000 miles, my 1968 Chevy convertible had bought the farm. There's just so much you can do with duct tape." I love that line. Okay, Let's see what else we got here. Well, after this, there's a lot that goes on between Spenser and Paul. Paul's kind of with Spenser. Spenser's looking after him. And Paul is constantly shrugging and saying, I don't know, I don't care. He doesn't have an opinion about anything. He's not into anything. But every now and then, Paul asks why. Why this? Why that? Why did you do this? Why did you say that? And I think this is kind of the trigger as to perhaps Spenser seeing something in the boy and realizing that he's not dumb at all and that he does have a curiosity about things, but he's just never had a chance because of his parents. And Spenser decides he's going to give him a chance. See, Paul, what I'm trying to do is get you to decide what you'd like best to do. Are these questions too hard for you? You want to try watch my lips moving? With his face still turned to the window, the kid said, I don't care who I live with. They both suck. It doesn't make any difference. They're both awful. I hate them. The soft whine was a little shaky, as if he might cry. Son of a bitch, I said. I hadn't thought of that. Again he looked at me in an odd sort of triumph. So now what are you going to do? I wanted to shrug and look out the window. I said, I'll probably take you back to your mother and keep the $100. That's what I thought, the kid said. Would you rather I did something else? I said. He shrugged. We were through Reading Square almost to 128. Can I turn on the radio now? He said. No, I said. I knew I was being churlish, but the kid annoyed me. In his whiny, stubborn desperation, he irritated the hell out of me. Mr. Warm. Yeah, so this is what he's working with, a kid like that. And he continues, yeah, but it's more than $100. It's a way of thinking about things. The kid shrugged. If he did it enough, I would stop the car and bang his head on the pavement. Spenser's frustrated. When all your options are lousy, I said, you try to choose the least lousy. Apparently, you're equally bad off with your mother or father. Apparently, you don't care which place you're unhappy. If I take you back to your father, you're unhappy and I get nothing. If I take you back to your mother, you're unhappy and I get $100. So I'm taking you back to your mother. You understand? Sure, you want the 100. It would be the same if it were a dime. It's a way to think about things. It's a way not to get shoved around by circumstances. So you can see from the very beginning here that Spenser's trying to reason with him. He's trying to teach him. He's trying to get him to care and to think about things, which is really amazing. And that's who Spenser is. And then Paul continues, and Mommy will give you money, he said. Maybe you can fuck her. He checked me carefully, looking sideways at me as he said it to see how shocked I'd be. Your father suggested the same thing, I said. Your mom into sex, is she? The kid said, I don't know. Or you figure I'm so irresistible that it's inevitable? The kid shrugged. I figured I could take maybe 2 more shrugs before I stopped the car. And Spenser says, I also think it's bad form to talk about your mother that way to a stranger. Why? It's not done, I said. The kid shrugged and stared out the window. He had one shrug left. If my father had started to fight with you, what would you have done? I'd have subdued him. How? Depends how tough he is. He used to be a football player and he still lifts weights at the health club. I shrugged. It was catching. Do you think you could beat him up? He said. Oh, sure, I said. He's a big, strong guy, I guess. But I do this for a living. I'm in better shape. Big deal, the kid said. I didn't bring it up, I said. I don't care about muscles, the kid said. Okay, I said. I suppose you think you're a big man having muscles, the kid said. I think they're useful to me in what I do, I said. Well, I think they're ugly. I took my hands off the wheel long enough to turn my palms up. How come you're a detective, he said. Like the man said, because I can't sing or dance. Well, it's an awful gross job to me, he said. I made the same palms up gesture. We were passing the Burlington Mall. What exit do I take? I said. 4 and 225 toward Bedford. He said. How come you want to do a gross job? So, yeah, see, you can see Paul's asking all these questions and Spenser's trying to answer him honestly. He's irritated, but he's making an effort. It lets me live life on my own terms, I said. You sure you mean toward Bedford? Yes, I'll show you, he said, and he did. We turned off toward Bedford, turned right, and right again and over an overpass back toward Lexington. Emerson Road was not far off the highway, a community of similar homes with a lot of wood and glass and some stone and brick. It was contemporary, but it worked okay in Lexington. Okay. Spenser takes Paul to a restaurant. Paul said, I don't know what to have. I said, what do you like? He said, I don't know. I nodded. Yeah, I said, somehow I had a sense you might say that. He stared at the menu. I said, how about I order for both of us? What if you order something I don't like? Don't eat it. But I'm hungry. Then decide what you want. He stared at the menu some more. The waiter wandered back. You order? He said. I said, yes. We'll have 2 orders of Peking ravioli, the duck with plum sauce, the moo-shu pork, and 2 bowls of white rice. And I'll have another beer, and he'll have another Coke. The waiter said, okay. He picked up the menus and went away. Paul said, I don't know if I'll like that stuff. We'll find out soon, I said. You going to send my mother a bill? For the meal? Yes. No. Paul, I still don't see why you want to pay for my dinner. I'm not sure, I said. It has to do with propriety. The waiter came and plunked the ravioli on the table and 2 bottles of spiced oil. What's propriety? Paul said. Appropriateness. Doing things right. He looked at me without any expression. You want some raviolis? I said. Just one, he said, to try. They look gross. Okay, so there's a lot of that in the book, and step by step, things start to change. And I think the situation that we where we really find out a lot about Paul is when they're up in the cabins, up building the cabin in Maine, and Yeah, they have lots of conversations there too, and Spencer's trying to teach him, but we still don't know anything at all about Paul. And then this conversation comes in, and it's really surprising. What are we going to do tomorrow? He said. Anything you'd like to do? I said. It's Saturday. He shrugged. If he did enough weightlifting, maybe I could get him too muscle bound to do that. Like what? He said. If you could do whatever you wanted to do, what would it be? I don't know. When you're 25, what do you imagine yourself doing? I don't know. Is there any place you've always wanted to go that no one would take you or you were afraid to ask? He sipped at the beer. I like the movie The Red Shoes, he said. Want to go to the ballet? I said. He sipped at the beer again. Okay, he said. And this is the beginning of Spenser figuring out how he's going to help Paul, and then getting Paul interested in life. Well, let me just read one more to you. This is the very important conversation between Spenser and Susan. So they're all in Susan's apartment, and Susan is really angry that Spencer's brought all of them to her place without any warning. Spenser says he's promised them dinner, and Susan's just at wit's end over what's been going on the last few weeks. He says, I'm going to put this beer away, and went into the kitchen. Susan came out behind me. Just what in the hell do you think we're going to feed these people? Susan said. Got any cake? I said. I'm serious. I don't have anything in the house to serve 5 people. I'll go get something, I said. And let me entertain your guests? Your choice, I said. I don't care to have a fight, though. Well, don't do this to me. I don't simply sit around here waiting for your problems to drop by. Love me, love my problems, I said. Sometimes I wonder if that's a worthwhile trade-off. There you go, I said, talking that education management jargon again. She was looking in the refrigerator. If I want to say trade-off, goddammit, I'll say trade-off. I've got some of that Williamsburg bacon. We could make up a bunch of BLTs. Toast it, I said, and on the side, some of those homemade bread and butter pickles we did last fall. And cut flowers in a vase in the Meyer Davis Orchestra. You better go back in and help out on the conversation. Hawk must be ready to jump out of his skin. Not Hawk, I said. He doesn't mind silence. He doesn't want to talk. He won't talk. He doesn't sweat small talk much. He doesn't sweat anything too much, Susan says, does he? No, he's completely inside. Come on in and talk a bit. Then we'll all transfer to the kitchen and make sandwiches and eat. There's some cheese, too, and a couple of apples. It'll be a feast. I patted her lightly on the backside. Besides, we need your advice. My advice to you, big fella, is to keep your hands to yourself, she said. So, still, okay, it's a little bit light, but the tension is there. And the conversation continues. How about that property in Maine, I said. Susan propped up on one elbow. Freiburg, she said. Yeah, I told you I'd build a house on it. When you got a chance, you said. This is the chance. You and Paul? Yes. She was quiet, lying naked beside me on her right side with her head propped on her right elbow. Her lipstick was smeared. The intelligence in her face was like energy. It seemed almost to shimmer. That she was beautiful was only the first thing you noticed. Work release, she said. The kid's never been taught how to act, I said. He doesn't know anything. He's got no pride. He's got nothing he's good at. He's good at nothing but the tube. And you plan to teach him. I'll teach him what I know. I know how to do carpentry. I know how to cook. I know how to punch. I know how to act. You're not so bad in the rack either, big fella. I grinned. We'll let him work that out on his own, maybe. She shook her head. You make it sound simple. It's not. You don't teach people unless they want to learn. It's not just an intellectual exercise. It's a matter of emotion, of psychology. I mean, the boy may be positively pathological. He's got nothing to lose, I said. Compared to an afternoon of game shows on TV, anything is up. For Christ's sake, the kid watches soap operas, I said. So do I, Susan said. Well, your degeneracy is already established, I said. Besides, you do other things. Only with you, sweet potato. You want to get in on this, I said? The salvation of Paul Giacomin? Yeah. I'm willing to consult, she said, but I don't want to see you over-invested in this. The chances of success are slight. What happens if next week his mother runs out of money? We'll worry about that when it happens. It'll happen soon, Susan said. Women's intuition? Believe me, Susan said, it'll be soon. I shrugged. You'll keep him anyway, she said. I didn't say anything. You will, she said, you big goddamn sap. You know you will. He needs to grow up quick, I said. He needs to get autonomous. It's the only hope he's got. For him, he's got to stop being a kid at 15. His parents are shit. He can't depend on them anymore. He's got to get autonomous. And you're going to show him how? Yes. Well, no one better. You're the most autonomous human being I've ever seen. It's a grim prospect for a 15-year-old boy, though. And how do you like his prospects if he doesn't grow up quick? Yeah. So, basically, Spenser talks to Susan about being special and not being ordinary and not being common and going out of their way to help someone in need. And Susan doesn't buy into it at first, but then she does, and she goes along and she finally helps Spenser with his project, especially helping Paul with the dance and finding a school and all of that. And it's just a really interesting story that I think is a definite 10-star one. I think you're going to love it, and I would highly recommend that you, after this video, jump in and read this book. It's a really, really good book. I have confidence that you will like it a lot. Thanks a lot. See you next time.